take the starter off, I've got the bolts already loose. They're 13 millimeter. Go ahead and get these out of here, and then your starter will pull right off of there. Once you get the starter off, you'll see that the clutch the starter cup and the clutch is very accessible to get to. The next step is to remove this cover and then the belt that goes around it. Once you get the belt off, you can take this whole arm assembly, will just slide right off of the studs right here. Set it off to the side. Next step, we want to remove the muffler. There's 3 screws. There's 2 that holds it to the engine block and 1 right here. Go ahead and remove the muffler. And then we can see the damage. This saw is not that old, but if you look, I don't know if you can see it in there, but we've got some mechanical damage to the piston. It looks to me like the top ring may have broken because there's a gash missing out of the very top ring land or groove. But we'll go ahead and get this thing tore down and see how it turns out. Go ahead and remove the air filter. When you use these TS420s for concrete saws, they don't live very long. If you use them to cut rebar or metal, stuff like that, it seems to live a little longer. And as you can tell, this engine has been dusted pretty severely. That's nothing but just pure grit, concrete dust. Heck on these engines. I'm going to drop this air filter on the ground and see if I can get anything to come out of it. Not a whole lot. The customer's probably replaced this filter trying to make this thing run. But go ahead and take the orange cover. There's a screw here, one here, and one here. Go ahead and loosen those up. Go ahead and loosen up the cap for the spark plug. Take it out of the way. Now you see that there's a little throttle wire that's hooked around the throttle lever right there. Go ahead and take your pair of needle nose and pull that up out of the way. Go ahead and snake your kill wire leads out of the way, and you should be able to just pull this cover right off of here. And you may still have to snake a few wires here, right there, and this should just lay up out of the way. You could leave it like that, or you can actually go as far as to remove the wires from the switch up here. Go ahead and remove the cylinder head cover. There's a couple of screws. There's one here, and there's one here, and there's one. I think that's it. It's been a while since I've done one of these. Oh yeah, it's right here. Part of the flywheel cover screw. Go ahead and remove your flywheel cover. Get it off to the side. Now, to keep from having to fight this coil wire, just go ahead and remove the ignition module. It's real easy. One here, and one right there. Get in there. Now we're getting somewhere. Getting down to the meat and potatoes of this job. As you can tell, after you strip all the plastic out from around the engine, you can actually get to what you need to get off, which is the jug or the cylinder. The next step we want to do, we want to remove the carburetor screw here, and there's 2 right up in here, and they're T27. Go ahead and slide your choke lever off out of its post and remove the throttle or the choke linkage from the carburetor. You'll notice that the carburetor is loose now, and so is the intake manifold. That's due to the screws being out. What you want to do now, you can actually take this carburetor and just slide it straight up and out. Once you get your carburetor off, just kind of inspect it, and you can tell that it's a dual barrel carburetor. This is your fresh air port here, and your carburetor down below. I always recommend rebuilding the carburetor every time I do a top end job, just to cover my rear end on the repair. A lot of times I'll just replace the carburetor, or I don't offer any warranty at all. You can do what you want to do, but if you rebuild the carburetor and it's not working right, you have a chance of burning up the piston and cylinder you just put on. So let's go ahead and loosen the clamps here, one here and one on the bottom. Once you get the clamps loose, carefully, and I mean carefully, take a screwdriver and pry these rubber boots off the cylinder head. Get the intake manifold and boot assembly off, and we're going to take the saw and we're going to turn it upside down and spill gas everywhere because you forgot to put the cap on. Real smart. Always have shop rags around, people. I can't believe I did that. Give me just a minute. I never once said I was perfect. But anyway, your jug screws, you can get them down through here. If you look, this plug here is got this handle bracket in the way. Take the handle bracket off. There's the repair tag, dropped off by Juan. No worky. But anyway, on the bottom here, they're going to be pretty tight. They may what you want to do, get you a T27 with a long bit. I've got a 1/4 inch ratchet. You can actually use a 3/8 ratchet if you want to, but break all 4 bolts loose here. Go ahead and loosen those screws that I talked about a few seconds ago, and then go ahead and turn the saw back over on its feet. Carefully inch this cylinder up like that. Say hello, piston. And oh wow, yep, here's part of the piston ring broken in half. Let's take a look at this piston a little bit closer. There's the intake side. It's got oil, but all the oil grooves that come factory on this piston are gone. The edges here are just razor sharp. The piston skirt's razor sharp. Even the top of the piston is just sharp, sharp, sharp. What you want to do is look down in here, and it's really not that bad, and it's probably going to be salvageable, but you want to inspect the rod bearing. This one seems to be okay. If you got rod bearing failure or crankshaft bearing failure, you can replace those bearings, but it's just going to be more labor involved and about probably $50 to $60 more in parts. But let's get it turned around here so we can see what the real damage looks like. Yeah, that piston is gone, and it looks to me like the piston ring broke and just got lodged in a port, and it just in the exhaust port. And I don't know if I can get that off there or not, but you can see where it pushed the piston up. Went ahead and took the piston off of the connecting rod. I've had a lot of requests to say, well, why did this engine fail? Well, the number one cause is dirt ingestion. This is your air filter box. As you know, stated in the first video I did, this was a concrete saw, and whenever you are sawing concrete, those fine particles get past the filter 9 times out of 10 because either it's not installed correctly, or it's pinched, or the foam around the filter is damaged. And even the safety filter, it gets past that. But dirt ingestion causes severe ring wear. If you'll look, I'm going to put this piston ring down inside this bore here and use the piston to square it up. Look at the gap. That gap is enormous. That should be probably, oh, I'm not sure what the spec is on this one, but probably 5 thousandths gap of ring groove or ring end gap. That ring is just completely wore out. When this thing sucks in dirt into the carburetor, it goes right into the motor, right into where the piston is, going up and down, and it's just like liquid sandpaper. The only way you can keep from that is to service the air filter. This engine doesn't look like it was lean seized. You can have a failure on a 2-cycle engine by lean seize. You can either do that by your oil mixture's too light, you're not running 50 to 1. You can get a pinhole in a gas line, causing it to suck air, unmetered air, into your fuel system. You can have a crankshaft seal go bad, causing unmetered air to be sucked into your crankcase. All those factors can cause an engine to lean seize. It's very hard to explain to a customer whenever he comes in and his engine's burned up because he let it go too far and the crank seal just disintegrated, and he just kept using it and basically burned up his engine. But if anybody has any questions about why a 2-cycle engine disintegrates like this, blows up, or whatever you want to call it, I think what happened to this one, here's the other piece of that ring. This was actually the top ring. That ring got so thin and brittle that whenever that gap got wide enough, it got hung in one of the ports on the cylinder head, but and broke. So whenever the ring came on around, it caught the exhaust port and bam, it just broke it. You can actually see the indentation in the top of the piston right there, where it kind of messed it up. What I'm going to do, I'm going to try one of the piston kits that Donnie Boy 73 was talking about, the Nicosil piston kit that you can order aftermarket. I think the dealer cost on the piston and cylinder kit's like $150, and that doesn't include, you know, taxes and stuff like that. But I think I can get a piston and cylinder kit for this online through eBay for about $65, and I'm gonna order it, and we'll get it in, and we'll get this puppy put back together and running, hopefully, or not hopefully. I know I can make it run. First thing you want to do is put your piston rings on the piston. Be careful not to break the rings putting them on. And also, the rings will only go one way because you have a piston stops, or piston ring stops. There's one here, and there's one right here. The first step is to go ahead and install one of your G-clips. I like the G-clips rather than the C-clips because the G-clips are easier to put in. You just stick them in, and you can just turn the pair of pliers, and they'll just pop right in. Once you have that G-clip installed, you can go ahead and slide the piston down inside the cylinder, and just ever so little bit, just enough to make the ring stick down in there, And the piston only goes one way, so we're going to be real super careful to compress these rings. This aftermarket cylinder is actually chamfered right here, so it makes putting the rings on there a little easier. That one's good. Go ahead and try to squeeze that one in. There we go. I have to give you just a little bit of help here to push it in, but it will go. Come on, baby. Oh, there you go. All right, now she is in. Make sure everything's good and not binding. Go ahead and pull the piston back out just enough to clear the wrist pin. Reset the bearing surface there. And now then, when you get ready to put this piston and jug down on this engine, as you can tell, when we go to set it down over the rod, it'll make it easier to slide the wrist pin through the piston. Go ahead and install your cylinder gasket onto the engine block. Go ahead and install your new rod bearing. Carefully slide the piston down over the rod. Lining up the connecting rod and piston hole or wrist pin hole. Slide, I know you can't see that, but slide the, I'm going to get this wrist pin started first and get it pushed up through there, about right there. It's hard to do because you're just trying to eyeball this. I believe I've got it though. There we go. Go ahead and push the wrist pin all the way through to where it stops on the G-clip that you just put in on the other side. Now the next step is to install your other G-clip to keep the wrist pin in place. I can't stress enough how important it is to make triple sure, quadruple check, sextuplet check that those G-clips are down in the grooves. They can look like they're in there, but they'll lead you astray. But make sure they're locked in them and the grooves in that piston, because it won't last very long if one of them clips come out. Go ahead and rotate your crank and rod down to bottom dead center, and go ahead and lower your piston in place. I mean your cylinder in place, my bad. That looks good. Make sure the gaskets is there. And before we fire this motor off, we're going to lubricate the top end with some 2-stroke oil. You could put a little 2-stroke oil on the piston and stuff before you start putting it together, but it sure is messy trying to work with that stuff. Basically now we're going to turn the unit over, and we're going to start the tightening the cylinder head down. You want to do it in an X shape, and that should be good to go there. It's the only thing I don't like about the TS410, TS420s is the cylinder jug is attached through the bottom of the saw. The TS700 to TS800, you can do a top end job in no time on one of those. The jug comes off from the top. There you go. There we go. Okay, the gasket's still good and in place. Get them all torqued down, and we'll start putting the mufflers and the carburetors and the ignition back on. Once you get the cylinder torqued down, just take your flywheel and turn the motor over. I'm going to pour a little 2-stroke oil in on top of the piston and let that get sloshy around in there, and just kind of move it around. If you feel any binding at all, something ain't quite right. But that's El Perfecto right there. As you can tell, I've got some 2-stroke oil coming out of the exhaust port, so I know I've got lubrication, and I've got a little bit coming out of the intake, so we're good there. Next thing you want to do is go ahead and install your intake manifold. Just go ahead and set it down in place. Be sure to hook up the pulse line right here on the fitting. Put that on. Just go ahead and get them pushed over onto your manifold and tighten up the clamping screws or the bands. Once you get your bands tightened, just be sure your manifold is behind this little post right here for the time being, because that'll help when you install the carburetor. It kind of gets it out of the way. But once you get the carburetor in there, we're gonna raise this up like this, and we're gonna clear that little post right there in a little while. But bear with us just a second, and we're gonna get the primer bulb in and new fuel lines, and then we'll drop the carburetor in. Now, I went ahead and installed some fuel line on here. This is about 1 foot on this end, and this I cut a little bit longer so I have enough room to play with. But let's go ahead and drop the carburetor down into the engine bay here. Sorry about that, folks. Get my tripod set up. Snake your fuel line down below that spring right there. Bring it up through the primer bulb cavity right here. Should be about right. Snake your carburetor all the way down until it nestles good there. And that looks good. So we got the discharge side of the carburetor hooked up. We've got the main fuel line hooked to the carburetor, which will go right on this nipple right here. Get those hooked up, and we'll get the primer bulb installed right here. Go ahead and get your primer bulb ready to snap down in the hole. The discharge side of the primer bulb is the longer one. Oh no, yes, excuse me. The shorter nipple is the carburetor side, the longer nipple goes back to the gas tank. Once you get the gas lines on, the next step is going to be to go ahead and then torque down the carburetor with the screws that you took out to begin with. And they're probably the longest screws on the saw. And there's only 3 of them. You don't have to torque the crap out of them, just get them snug. Like that. Go ahead and hit your primer bulb a few times, get that fuel up in there. It's working good. Next step, go ahead and install your muffler. Just be careful not to get the gasket. The gasket will get out of place sometimes. Just make sure you get that in there real good. Don't cross thread the screws. Just work it back and forth until you get it cinched down. Okay, now install your last muffler mounting screw. And just go ahead and finish tightening up your muffler. Next step, we're going to go ahead and install the cylinder air baffle. Just snake it down over the cylinder and tighten up the 3 screws that hold it on. Go ahead and remove the old deco valve or deco valve, decompression valve out of the old head. It's a 13mm. If it's worn out, replace it. This one's okay. The way you can tell that it's worn out, and I'll show you, this is basically like an engine valve. If you push it in and it has no resistance in the detent ball and spring does not hold it down like that, then it's bad. If you can take it and wiggle it around in there, it's worn out. Need to replace it. But this is a leak point for air if that valve gets worn out. So we'll just go ahead and thread it into the new cylinder head and get it tightened down. Go ahead and install you a new spark plug. Tighten it down. Next, go ahead and install your flywheel cover, and we'll get those bolts cinched down as well. Go ahead and replace your or install your choke knob and lever and wire assembly onto the carburetor, and it sits on this post right here. Next step is to go ahead and put the top cover back on. You'll have to install your throttle cable, and we'll get the air filter on it and get it cranked up here real shortly. Y'all bear with me. Next step, we're going to install the boom arm. Just go ahead and get it put in place. We'll get the belt on, get it tight, and we'll install the starter. Go ahead and get your starter bolts, nuts rather, installed, but don't tighten them down because we still have to adjust the belt tension. Once you get the starter installed and your nuts finger tight, this is an automatic tensioner. Just loosen off on it and it will automatically, there we go. Now the belt's tight. Go ahead and tighten your starter. Your starter actually bolts this down as well, so we'll get the starter tight, and then we'll put the guard over the belt, and she'll be ready to crank. Before we jump the gun here, let's go ahead and put the air filter on it. Put your safety filter on. Get it in place. Snaps in over that ridge there. Go ahead and install the main filter. Ooh, got a little dirty already. And then go ahead and install your air filter cover. One thing you want to be sure is you don't get the outer rim of this foam of this filter pinched. Make sure it's all the way down in the grooves all the way around before you put the cover on. Well, we got everything buttoned back together, got the air filter on it, got the starter and all the shrouds on it. We'll go ahead and try to get it popped off here. Go ahead and push your deco valve in. Go ahead and set your trigger to start. Pull it through a couple of times and give it a good jerk. Uh-oh. Get it cleared out. All that extra oil that's stuck in the cylinder. It's got good idle. I'm going to run this tank probably about 40 to 1 for the first tank to get it broke in good. You don't want to rev it up a whole bunch of RPM because it's brand new, top end. Once you run that first tank of gas, you can just hammer down on it and it don't matter. Awesome. If you have any questions about how to rebuild a Stihl TS420 or Stihl equipment in general, let me know. More Medic 1. Y'all have a good day.